How do you request IP? So let's say that I'm gonna take down that specific interface. So we don't have anything right now. So I'm just gonna use the DH client, which is the HTTP. You can see in the right side we got disconnected. So we just do DH client, the interface, and if we do ifconfig, you can see that we got the IP. Okay, so that's very important. By doing this, you don't need to configure anything else. The next step that you need to do is just you need to ping something outside to see if you're getting connection. You can see that you're getting 65 bytes response, so we are fine. Another important point here is that sometimes I highly recommend you to also ping IPs, because sometimes you will have internet access but not DNS resolution. So if you, for example, do a ping with an IP address, you can see that you get a response. But let's say that I'm going to access the DNS configuration, which is right here, and I'm just going to comment out the name server like this. If I ping Yahoo, you can see it says unknown host. But if I ping the IP, you can see that I'm still getting response. That's a pretty common mistake, that when we are trying to ping domain names and we see that we don't have response, we think that we don't have connection, we don't have any internet access, and that's not true. As you can see, we have communication, but we don't have DNS resolution. So as you saw, I just need to go to resolve, and in this case I enable the default one, which actually was added by the DHCP server when I executed the DH client. But a quick trick also here is that sometimes our name service doesn't work, so you can use Google ones if you don't mind going through Google traffic. It's up to you, which is 8888. You just save it, and you can see that if we do a ping, we get again access. Okay, just gonna revert it back to the one that I had, and that's it. So we have configuration. If for some reason when you do ifconfig you don't get any interface, that's a troubleshooting. Is out of scope, but I recommend you to go to Kali forums. They have multiple support there. It's not our scope to fix those issues. We are assuming everything's up and running. What is next? The next thing is that you need to know what is running in your Kali Linux. Some of the time there are multiple services running. If you do lsoft-e TCP, you can see what it is running right now. We can see that we have Apache and MySQL. Okay, MySQL is the database, Apache is the web server, and this is very important. This because probably you're running services that you don't know, and probably you don't need them to be running. Like Apache, if you don't have a web server in Kali, you don't need to run it. The way you manage those services is by using the service command, which I'm going to show you in a second. The second option is you can go to Kali Linux system services, and here you have the services that are running or can be run, and you just click on them to restart, start, stop. The same for all of them. HTTP for the web server, Metasploit for the framework, exploitation framework, MySQL for the database, OpenBus, SSH, remote access. But sometimes it's boring for us to go to the menu all the time, so you can just quickly here say service, and then in this case Apache. If you, by the way, if you click and then you click the tab, it's gonna complete the command, which is pretty useful because it's gonna identify the service you are referring to if you don't remember the name. That's pretty cool. And then you say stop in this case. And then if we run our lsoft command again, trying to see which services are running in this specific Kali, we can see that we don't have Apache anymore. Okay, the same we can do with MySQL, and we can also obviously start Apache again. So that way you can use service in the command prompt to start stop services, and you don't need to do it through the menu. Since we're talking about Apache, let's talk about the configuration quickly of this guy. Again, we are not system administrators. We are not here to teach you how to configure Apache, MySQL. Those are out of scope of our academy. But definitely, we just want you to know where you can find those configuration files within Kali. Apache is found here in Apache 2, and here is the whole configuration as usual. Apache.conf, Apache2.conf has all the configuration from Apache. You know, if you have multiple servers, the log file, timeouts, I mean, all the configuration from Apache, HT access, anything. And also, here inside enable is what you want to look at. That's pretty useful because here is where you will have all the exercises. You can have here your own exercises loaded in your web server. So if you open enable 000 default, you can see that the document root is in bar ww. But if this is changed, you will always find here what is the root folder of your web server. In this case, it's bar www. So let's go there. Here, you can see that we have already our CSTT folder. So if we go there, you can put here any directories and files, and those are going to be reflected in your web server. So I just created here the Ola HTML, which is just hey there. So if we open our browser, in Kali they use this specific browser, which is it's called IceWhistle, which is basically a Firefox version. And here, if we paste our IP address, oh, this is not our IP address, let's grab it. So we have here our IP address and slash hola.html. Oh, it's not this. Let's see. Oh yeah, hola.html. Oh, sorry, we missed our folder CSTT. So you can see that we have access of our information. That's pretty useful because you can see that we can always load our exploits or anything that you are testing a web application. That's the way to go. Okay, so that's Apache. Let's talk about SSH. Well, SSH, everything is under SSH. Here you have everything. SSHD is to get access. SSHD, sorry. SSHD is to get access to your own SSHD configuration, and SSH without D has access to SSH client. So here you can configure whatever you have in your SSHD server. That's pretty much it. The way you test it is just obviously to do SSH localhost, and it says refused because if you remember, we don't have SSH running, so we do again a service SSH start. Now we can do else we can see it is running now, SSD, and finally we do SSH to localhost, and we might need, sorry, we should receive this kind of response like, hey, this is a new host, do you want to add it? You say yes, and you get a prompt. If you don't get this, there is a problem and you might need to reconfigure the server, but hopefully it's not. Finally, MySQL, the way you access it is with MySQL-h localhost. By the way, let me tell you something quickly. In Kali, you already have MySQL. You can see here is listening in localhost, which is totally recommended. You don't want your database to be using the IP address and therefore can be reached outside Kali. We are just using it locally. So here is listening locally, which is as expected. So you just need to do MySQL-h localhost and you should be fine. We get access. You can do something like use MySQL. This is out of scope, but just want to show you. Show tables. You will have the default tables configured in MySQL. Description of user, everything related to sysadmin. So again, if this is pretty useful because sometimes you need to access MySQL because you want to add a new server or you need to add a new application that requires a specific database. So that's the way to go. With MySQL, usually the password is Tor, T-O-O-R, and here you can use -p in case you have another password, and it's gonna prompt you for the password in case you change the password for root or if it is Tor, so you can enter it. Or you can also, if you added another user, like in my case I added another user, you can say -u the user and -p to prompt for the password, and then you enter the password for that user and you get access with that user. That's just another way to go. So I think that's all. Again, if you want to change the password for root or any other user, just use passwd. You will need to enter a new password. I am using root right now because all those options that I'm showing you, all those options are only executed by root, but it is highly recommended to use a user, a default user for you. So you just do add user test, and it will ask you for a password. Anything you want to write here, you say yes, and it is added. So the way you know it is added, you can just cut etc passwd and grab this test. You can see that it is already added there. And so if you want to remove it, you just do tell user test and it is removed. So we do cut again, we don't find it. And when you remove a user, you need to also remove manually the home folder, and that's it. Finally, in etc passwd, you might want to go and do a search for bash. Bash means that those specific users have access. You can see here we have Defender and Linux, they have bash, but sometimes, and especially Kali, I saw that it has many other users with bash. I don't recall, but I remember that probably, let's say that MySQL user right here, if he has this bash, that means MySQL can get access to your box with a shell. That's not recommended. So make sure to have all of them false, just root and your users with a bin bash. Everyone else being false. That's pretty much it in terms of quick configuration, guys. Hope you enjoy it. Vulnerability analysis is more scanning, like Cisco. If you have any Cisco routers, you can use these tools to scan those routers, database related scanners for SQL Server, for MySQL. We have really cool tools like SQL Map, SQL Ninja. Those ones, once you found a vulnerability in a web server that it is related to SQL injection, you can just automate the process to get access to the server or to dump the database. So those are pretty cool tools. We're going to be using them. Fuzzing tools, fuzzers that you can use to find vulnerabilities can be Spike. It's pretty cool, Spike. It is more related to find vulnerabilities in applications. It supports plain text and binary protocols. It's pretty powerful. We have MIS scanners. Again, as you see here, is Nmap again, is repeated. NIC2 is for web servers. I mean, this is kind of, multiple sections, and they repeat some of the tools. Open source assessments, Maltego is pretty cool. This is an application. I'm just gonna click on it. Maltego is pretty cool for threat intelligence. So basically, and actually it's a license. You need a license to use it, but they provide limited license for us that you just need to register, and I think they give you 30 days and you can use it. But basically what it does is, if you're trying to find, let's say in the IPT, advanced persistent threat kind of research, that we have a certification about that, by the way. If you want to know who are the threat actors behind, probably you find a username or you find an email password. Maltego, if you provide that information, he's going to try to find all the IPs related to that username and all the hosts that were registered by that name or related name. It's going to give you all the IPs, and then basically it's going to provide a map of all information related to that user. If you provide an IP, it's the same. It's going to say, okay, this IP was open, but it's also related to these other IPs, and eventually to this specific host and to this specific user. So it's pretty cool to find the whole picture about a specific person or a specific asset in the network. As I said, you need to register, and eventually you will get access to this tool, but I'm not gonna do anything here. Investigate, when you start trying to add information. You can see here, you can add parents, you can add children. That's all related to the nodes where you are dealing with a research, when you're trying to find specific persons, IPs, hosts, servers. And again, coming back to our set of tools. Okay guys, so we've quickly understood how Kali is installed, how it is configured, the services that are running, but basically Kali is powerful in terms of the applications running. As I mentioned, it is for penetration testers so that they can have a repository of multiple tools. And I'm gonna just quickly show you an overview of those tools. Don't worry, most of the tools, I'm not gonna say all of them, but many of the tools are gonna be taught during all of our cybersecurity think tank academy trainings. So depends on the one that you are taking. If you go to applications and then to Kali Linux, you can see here all the different applications and tools that are available. All are separated based on penetration testing effort phase. That means that obviously the first step, for example, is information gathering. That's why you can see here all the tools related to information gathering. That's all related to gather information about the host of the network available, what kind of host they are, if there are routers, switches, if there are Windows, Linux, SNMP servers, all related to the kind of assets to be tested is this specific section. So you can see multiple tools around here. DNS analysis. As I said before, probably you just use DNS walk, but probably when you come here, you realize that there are many other tools that you can always use. Many of the tools are repeated in other sections. Like here you can see Nmap as information gathering, but Nmap can also be used during vulnerability analysis. You know, it's very common. Maltego is pretty cool. This is an application. I'm just gonna click on it. Maltego is pretty cool for threat intelligence. So basically, and actually it's a license. You need a license to use it, but they provide limited license for us that you just need to register, and I think they give you 30 days and you can use it. But basically what it does is, if you're trying to find, let's say in the IPT, advanced persistent threat kind of research, that we have a certification about that, by the way. If you want to know who are the threat actors behind, probably you find a username or you find an email password. Maltego, if you provide that information, he's going to try to find all the IPs related to that username and all the hosts that were registered by that name or related name. It's going to give you all the IPs, and then basically it's going to provide a map of all information related to that user. If you provide an IP, it's the same. It's going to say, okay, this IP was open, but it's also related to these other IPs, and eventually to this specific host and to this specific user. So it's pretty cool to find the whole picture about a specific person or a specific asset in the network. As I said, you need to register, and eventually you will get access to this tool, but I'm not gonna do anything here. Investigate, when you start trying to add information. You can see here, you can add parents, you can add children. That's all related to the nodes where you are dealing with a research, when you're trying to find specific persons, IPs, hosts, servers. I'm going to talk about the top 10, which are these ones, but just want to give you a quick overview. Web applications again, all related to web applications, fossers, crawlers. You have multiple there, vulnerability scanners. There are many, as you can see here, and depending on the scan is the purpose. For example, Burp Suite is just a framework which you can use to intercept requests and response when you're trying to test an application. And actually, I have here, open it, Burp Suite. Burp Suite is very powerful. It's gonna allow you to scan hosts. It's gonna allow you to identify the structure of the specific web application. It's gonna list all the directories and resources available. As I said, it's gonna scan it so that you can find multiple vulnerabilities. Cross-site scripting is very common, but many of them. Intruder, which is pretty cool because you can even say, okay, I just want to test this specific parameter in the post request or this other one. So you can narrow this down into a specific parameter that you just want to test and concentrate your efforts, all of them trying to find vulnerabilities. Repeater, which is just to resend a request. I mean, multiple options. Again, these kind of tools we're going to be looking at when we are doing penetration testing on web applications. We have the Cybersecurity Web Application Defender. We're going to be using these kind of tools there. Recommended to attend. That's Burp Suite. Open it, Burp Suite. Burp Suite is very powerful. It's gonna allow you to scan hosts. It's gonna allow you to identify the structure of the specific web application. It's gonna list all the directories and resources available. As I said, it's gonna scan it so that you can find multiple vulnerabilities. Cross-site scripting is very common, but many of them. Intruder, which is pretty cool because you can even say, okay, I just want to test this specific parameter in the post request or this other one. So you can narrow this down into a specific parameter that you just want to test and concentrate your efforts, all of them trying to find vulnerabilities. Repeater, which is just to resend a request. I mean, multiple options. Again, these kind of tools we're going to be looking at when we are doing penetration testing on web applications. We have the Cybersecurity Web Application Defender. We're going to be using these kind of tools there. Recommended to attend. That's Burp Suite. Coming down to the other tools, we have password attacks, which is GPU. It's for GPU enable when you use your video card to do cracking. You have offline attacks where you can use specific tools which can help you to find vulnerabilities. You have Ophcrack. This is pretty cool for rainbow tables. Basically, it has all. You need to provide the rainbow tables, but there is an interface for you to use it, and basically, it will allow you to crack based on the rainbow tables provided. What is rainbow tables? Well, it is out of scope, but just so that you know, it is a set of compiled tables, gigabytes of hashes already compiled. So basically what it does is it will try to find multiple passwords and what are their hashes related. And when you use rainbow tables, it will just look up for those specific hashes already cracked, and it doesn't need to crack again. So it will help you to find passwords already cracked in faster than just instead of trying to find combinations. It will have always already pre-calculated hashes of those passwords. I mean, there are multiple tools that we are never end, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. Armitage, that's pretty awesome. Then I just want to show you quickly Armitage. Armitage is it leverage Metasploit. Basically, it's for pen testers, and you can imagine, as you can see here, all the hosts in that network that had been identified. So Armitage is going to be using fingerprinting or enumeration tools to list all those hosts. It will use Nmap for port scanning behind the scenes, and then once it has all the hosts identified, you can just right click on those hosts and say, hey, scan it or logging in, give me the services, operating system, and eventually, if it is vulnerable, it is just a right click to get access into that specific host. It will test all the different exploits against those machines based on the services identified that are running. I mean, I don't want guys to confuse you, but basically this is one of the powerful tools that we are going to learn also in some of our certifications. Here in the left side, you can see all the exploits for depending on what you are testing. It's going to give you all the information available for MySQL, for example, if it is SQL Server, what they have available, if it is FreeSBD, if it is Solaris, which is too old, Windows, firewalls, antiviruses, everything that you need depending on the effort that you are doing. So this is an amazing tool, and it's one of the tools that we're going to be learning in other certifications. And finally, the top 10 ones, as I said, this is kind of Kali put most of the well-known used tools. Aircrack is pretty cool for cracking Wi-Fi networks. Nowadays, it's not that successful. Probably 5 years ago was very successful because most of the Wi-Fi's were web enabled, which was a pretty weak protocol, and you can easily find passwords for Wi-Fi networks. Nowadays, it's kind of more difficult with WPA protocol, but still possible. Burp Suite, as you saw, is a proxy to the web to find vulnerabilities in web applications. Hydra is pretty cool. This is going to allow you to brute force services to find passwords. As you can see here, you can use a password list, and you can provide the FTP server, SMTP for a web email server, web applications for login credentials, and it's pretty powerful. It's pretty cool, and for password brute forcing. We have here John the Ripper, which is a offline password cracker. Pretty useful if you want to find passwords found in your Windows hashes or in your zip, RAR archives, or in obviously in Linux passwords, many formats it supports. Maltego, as I said, is for you to identify, is to do threat intelligence, to find connections between assets, users, organizations. Metasploit framework, anytime you wanna configure exploits, create your own exploits, or use exploits already for different services is the way to go. Nmap, so just a port scanner, pretty powerful. If you want to know which um, ports are open in specific host. OWASP Zap, that's from OWASP, is similar to Burp Suite, and in my opinion, less powerful, but it is open source. And I mean, Burp Suite is also open source, it has the licensed version, but in my opinion, OWASP Zap is less powerful than Burp, but still, it also allows you to do pretty cool scanning, allows you to do interception of request response when trying to test web applications. Uh, Allows you to do fuzzing too. SQL map is pretty cool tool when you have a vulnerability in a web application which is SQL injection related. This tool is going to help you to get a remote shell or to dump the content of the database. Wireshark is just a network sniffer for you to analyze packets going on through the network. So these are just quick view of all the tools used available in Kali. Many of them are going to be used through our cybersecurity think tank certifications. So we are going to make sure to mention them so that you know which ones are related to which certifications, and just be ready to play with them.